Is this when they banned alcohol?
Yes.
Yes.
Still? Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so after World War I is over, there is this idea that we need to get things back to normal. We have something called the Geneva Convention that happens in the 20s to ban chemical weaponry, like the gas warfare that we saw that we talked about. Like mustard gas.
Well, people still use gas.
Chemical warfare like that is now banned from the 20s. But
worldwide or like
worldwide. Well, most international countries decided to ban it. Not all, but most of them did. That didn't mean that was the end of that use, the use of gas on people. If you remember from our stations, if you remember reading that timeline, at the very bottom of the timeline, it talks about the most recent use of gas on people is Syria. Just a few years ago, he used on his own people.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
just a few years ago.
Yeah, just a few years ago. 2017, I think, was the last one
Pepper
that we
spray.
heard of. I think it happened in 16 and 17. Either 15, 16 or 16, 17.
I
one of
think
the
we
two.
should ban pepper spray.
So what happened during the Industrial Revolution? What did we make a lot of?
Drugs.
Money, because of lots of things from the assembly line. We call it mass
Oil.
Production.
Yeah.
production. Mass production. We make so much stuff. So our, we also talked about that one of the main causes of World War I was militarism, and that we produce a lot of things for military purposes in World War I. After that's over, now we can go back to producing things for everyday use.
Skittles.
So we're gonna see why exactly Roaring Twenties was called the Roaring Twenties, right?
Oh, everyone will go to these.
So make sure you have on the top of your note paper the Roaring Twenties as the title of your notes. Everybody have that written? I see some blank tops of your papers.
Yeah, I guess
This
alright.
one.
Roaring
Roaring Twenties, top of your paper.
20s. Comma.
And we'll try to go through quickly. This is mostly just an overview, okay, an introduction.
Is it?
Yes.
That's cool.
So we want to look at one question throughout this and talk about this. Did the Roaring Twenties continue the progressive era reforms? Now, what does that mean? Progressive era reforms. What does that mean?
Progressive.
What does that mean?
Progressive. It helps with your car insurance.
Not that
Progressive.
progressive means
You're
forward
making work.
thinking. You're making, and then reform means to make things
Different.
different but better. Like
Well-
find a better way to do things.
Well, I
Find a
don't know
different,
if
better
that helped. I mean,
Yeah.
we went to Roaring Twenties to being depressed, so.
thing. Well, and we'll talk about why though. But reforming something is trying to make it better than before. Just like when we talked about the progressive era, we're trying to make housing better, child labor better, women's rights
Let's
better. We
see.
talked about all those
Labor
things.
better.
Yeah, because they had children working in factories. Remember we looked at the little pictures? We talked about that article you guys read?
Where the kids working.
Okay. So this guy was one of the first presidents in
What's his name?
Harding
Oh, well, he's
in the
not.
1920s. And I really wanted to keep this up.
23.
Anything that is underlined, I want you guys to write.
That was 4 years in presidency.
Yeah. 1921,
When you go military.
1923. We've got anything underlined, I want you guys to write down.
A return to.
So right after World War I, it was this return to normalcy. That was the quote that everybody said. We have to return to normal, get back to normal. This is the new normal. Have you guys ever heard those words before?
Yes, 'cause
Mhm.
it's like, same with like how probably after this pandemic's gonna be over, we're probably gonna do that too, because we're like, hey, well, life is going on and we're so far behind that we're just gonna make all these crazy laws just so that we can go back to quote unquote normal.
Or we're trying to go, yeah. Okay.
So it's gonna happen regardless after this whole thing.
Well, to be fair,
No one American. They will still have it for 5 years.
well,
So yes, exactly. You're hearing this a lot. Is this the new normal? We'll get back to normal. What is the new, normal? We've heard that a lot. Whenever there's a huge thing that happens, there's always this push to going back to normal. Guess what happened during World War I? What big thing that we talked about that connects to what's going on right now? What big disease?
oh, what?
The flu.
Spanish flu, right? Spanish flu happened. A lot of our responses were the same. You can't go anywhere in public unless you wear a mask. You have to social distance. Schools have been closed down.
What happened to
A
that?
lot of people died. So that
So look at
happened.
this pandemic.
And then the pandemic lasted a little bit longer than World War I. So the pandemic was going on after World War I was over. And it was increased when the soldiers came home. It didn't really hit the US until the soldiers came home, and then just it went crazy right here in our country. So we have this whole let's go back to normal kind of push that we had. We won't talk about other things on there. We
The
just
teapot.
don't have the time. This slide, there's a bunch of important stuff on here. This is one of the main parts of
Real
the
income
20s.
increases.
So again, write down anything that is underlined on your paper, okay?
Welfare.
What is a consumer?
You
Someone that gives you something.
You
Or something that makes something.
consume the product they give you.
Right, which means you
Take
buy it, right? You consume it, you put it, you take it in, you know, anything that
it.
you
You
were
inject it.
receiving.
You sniff it.
So when this is talking about
drink it,
American Consumer
basically.
Society, it's talking about us buying things, okay? Because that's what we produced. A lot of stuff.
Mass production.
We went back to that. It was a big thing during the 80s and 90s, and then and even the early 1900s, and then 1915, 1917, when the war starts and when we joined the war, that was the huge push for our factories. But then we get done with the war, and now we're back to mass production, back to making all of this stuff. So
Yes.
welfare capitalism is kind of going back to the survival of the fittest. You need to, you need to make a lot of money. And so salaries start increasing. Welfare capitalism is where they also give a higher income to people as well, to boost the economy, get people buying things. Whenever there's a lag in the economy, usually they try to do something to stimulate the economy and get people buying things again. That's what happened after the Great Depression. So income increases, people's income increases. And one thing that also happened with this was decreased influence of unions. They talked about unions, how they were trying to protect people. But when people are getting paid more, do they need to rely on the unions as much?
No.
Not really, because one of the primary things where people are striking as part of a union is because they feel like they're getting paid unfair wages. Right now in Chicago, the teachers in Chicago are striking, not for wages this time though. They want to stay online.
Isn't it for like what you call it? Not for wages, but how their schools and stuff are.
Yeah, they want to stay online, and the school districts are trying to put them back in person. And
But
the
isn't it,
union wants to stay online, and everybody in the union, but there still are in every area. There's teachers who want to stay online. There's teachers who want to be back in person.
Chicago.
Depends on who you are, really.
Chicago's a weird place.
So mass production was a huge thing. Wide variety and availability of consumer products at affordable prices. So because we're able to produce so much stuff,
you lower the price on the things?
yeah, you can lower
Like
the
there's
price.
so
It's
much of
cheaper to
it. There's so much of it that they're just like, oh,
Supply and demand. The more of it you have, the less it, the more of it you have, the less the cost. This least.
Yes.
You guys know what I'm saying. You guys know what I'm
Then
saying.
there's the
And then when you
opposite.
have less of it, lower supply,
More.
the cost is higher because there is a greater demand, right? So it's that
Yes.
balance that always has to happen. It's the same thing. There's a ton of stuff out there. The prices are going to be super low, so now people can afford things.
Whoa. America.
And yes, I think it was one of you guys mentioned that. We'll talk about it in a second. Actually,
Beer?
when it fits better. Installment plans. What these basically are is basically when we start buying on credit.
Ugh.
And having payments where don't buy it all right now, don't pay for it all right now, pay for only a little bit at a time. And this is the moment that I have a love and hate relationship with. I really do. I have a hard time with this because this is like where credit and buying things on credit happens and starts. Because you say, oh, I'll pay you back later. And guess what? You buy something else, oh, I'll pay you back later. Oh, I'll pay you back later. And then you suddenly have all this debt. What is one of the biggest problems that people have today?
Debt.
Debt. This is where it all started, guys.
boom.
Yeah. So this is why I like it, but I don't like it because it
Credits.
started this, oh, it's okay to be in debt. It's okay. Like, I don't know why people thought that it's okay ever to have to, besides like houses and cars just because there's so much money. But anything else, like I think there should be no way we should have credit for that. I think if you have, like, it so much
They
problems,
have
so many
like
problems.
credit for everything.
Yes, it's true.
Like,
So this is where it all started,
hey, do you
guys.
want this flip phone? Buy it
You know
on
what I think
credit.
about? What I feel so weird.
Cost you.
After
cut
like
your
in the
costs.
early 1900s, everything was like all of America was actually America. Like before that, it was like back and forth with native people. But now it's just like they have all this land and yeah.
By this point, all the natives are in reservations.
Yeah.
Those basically came to a standstill in the 1890s.
Just think about it. That was like only 20 years ago before
Mhm.
that. And then this is 20 years ago after.
Yep. It's true.
For the
It's
young
true.
businessman.
And that's why when we talk about Native Americans in the war, they were fighting, one of the big things they're fighting for is trying to get their citizenship, and it's true. 1924, one of the reform things, right, we're talking about, is it still progressive, is it still reforming, was to give Native Americans citizenship in the 1924 Citizenship Act. So here are some ads. Suddenly, because we have all this stuff to make, let's get people to buy things.
How's your breath today?
If you look up ads from the 1920s, and even into the 1950s, there's some ads that would be very,
Questionable.
yeah, there's things that would not be approved today because they'll do things like, you're not woman enough, or you're not a good woman unless you make your man dinner every day, you know, like sexist things that are,
Cut your costs.
things that are wrong, like, I mean, they're advocating for cigarettes right there, so.
What the heck is that? A consumer, like, what is that for young businessman? And what, is he
Yeah.
buying a car?
Oh, it's advertising.
Oh, okay. I was like, what? You just buy a
Yeah.
young businessman or what?
Okay, so there's a lot of hard.
Well, that's what Africa
Oh
was fighting with the British.
no.
No, not this point. This was just
White resentment.
It's a picture of him in his uniform. So in society, for people who are Black at this time, this was, and we're going to talk about why, but for some reason, the 1910s to 1920s, there's this huge resentment that whites have to Blacks.
Oh man, whites those.
This is after, I mean, we have slavery is over in the 60s, and then we have Reconstruction where they're trying to get Blacks to be like in Congress, in government positions, get them higher. And then the South, and then that is over and it ends, and the South is like, oh, we're gonna go back to our hateful ways, and it just kind of goes to another high point in the 10s and the 20s, 1910s, 1920s. So a lot of white resentment and lynchings,
Oh,
which are
lynchings.
what?
They love lynching so much. They're hanging, basically.
Hangings, right? The execution. Lynchings happened a lot during the 1910s and 1920s. Okay, we'll get one more.
Do you think?
Immigrants. How we treated immigrants during the 20s. We just had a world where we're a little suspicious about immigrants at this time. People
We
coming
said
into
no.
our country.
Americans said no to that.
So we have the first Red Scare because communism in Soviet Union when they were, or Russia, when they were starting to build. So we had the first Red Scare. We're terrified that they're going to come in here and create communism here. Communism. And then quota laws. This is an article, the political cartoon about quota laws where we just say, all the people who want to come here from Europe, we're only going to allow 3%. So we're a little worried that they're going to come and infiltrate, our countries.
After we got done with war too.
Yep.
That kind of stuff.
I mean, the war did just happen in Europe, right? So,
Sakharov.
all right, that's where we're going to end from there. If you did not keep on your notes, we're going to finish this introduction next week. Okay? Your homework is to finish your one pager if you do not finish it.
Wow.
Okay?
Oh, God.
Okay?
That was
All right. And I'll pause it.